Some cold cases fade quietly into storage rooms and forgotten file cabinets. Others never do. Some cases refuse to rest, not because of media attention, not because of public pressure, but because of the evidence. The kind of evidence that lingers in investigators' minds long after they leave the force. The kind that feels unfinished. The kind that still haunts them. For detectives, evidence is supposed to bring clarity. A fingerprint identifies a suspect. DNA tells a story. A witness confirms a timeline. But in certain cases, the evidence does the opposite. It creates more questions than answers. It suggests something terrifying without ever fully explaining it. And sometimes it leaves behind an image, a sound, or an object that investigators can never forget. In one case, a young woman vanished after leaving work late one evening. Her car was later found abandoned on the side of a quiet road. There were no signs of a struggle. Her purse was still inside. The keys were still in the ignition. But what haunted investigators most was what they found in the back seat, a single shoe, neatly placed as if removed carefully. There were no footprints nearby, no drag marks. No witnesses. That shoe became a symbol of the case. Detectives later admitted that the image of it sitting alone in the back seat never left them. It suggested calmness in the middle of chaos. It made no sense. Decades later, the case remains unsolved, and that shoe remains in evidence storage. In another chilling investigation, a child disappeared from a residential neighborhood in broad daylight. There were no screams, no suspicious vehicles reported. Days later, search teams discovered something deeply disturbing in a wooded area, a small blanket belonging to the child, folded carefully beside a tree. It wasn't torn, it wasn't dirty. It looked intentionally placed. Detectives described the moment they found it as deeply unsettling. It felt deliberate, personal, almost like a message. Despite years of investigation, no suspect was ever charged. The blanket still sits sealed in an evidence box, a silent reminder of a mystery that refuses to close. Sometimes it isn't a physical object that haunts investigators, it's a recording. In one decades-old murder case, a voicemail was left on the victim's answering machine just hours before their death. The message was brief, just breathing, slow, steady breathing. No words, no background noise. For years, detectives replayed that recording, hoping to identify anything that could lead to a suspect. Audio experts analyzed it repeatedly. Nothing conclusive ever emerged. The recording remains archived, and former investigators have admitted that hearing it even once was enough to stay with them for years. In another case, police responded to a house fire that initially appeared accidental. Inside, they discovered evidence suggesting the fire had been intentionally set. But what truly haunted the lead detective was a photograph found partially burned in the debris. It showed the victim standing beside someone whose face had been deliberately scratched out. The damage wasn't from the fire, it had been done before. Investigators never identified the person in the photograph. The image became one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in the case file. A silent clue with no clear answer. Cold cases often contain evidence that feels incomplete. A fingerprint that doesn't match anyone in the database. DNA that belongs to someone who was never identified. In one such case, a single unidentified fingerprint was found at a violent crime scene. It didn't belong to the victim. It didn't belong to anyone close to them. And it never matched any criminal record. Detectives described it as a ghost print, proof that someone was there, but no way to know who. There are also cases where the haunting evidence is something that shouldn't exist at all. In one investigation, a handwritten letter was mailed to the victim's family weeks after the crime. The letter contained details only the killer would know. It wasn't signed. It wasn't traced. Handwriting experts couldn't conclusively match it to anyone. The family kept a copy for years, but investigators kept the original sealed away. Some detectives admitted they avoided reading it more than necessary. It felt too personal. Too intimate, as if the killer wanted to stay close. In another cold case, a security camera captured a shadowy figure walking just outside the frame moments before a victim disappeared. The figure's face was never visible. Just a silhouette moving slowly across the edge of the screen. Investigators enhanced the footage dozens of times. The image never became clearer. That blurred outline became the face of the case, of presence that was seen but never known. What makes this kind of evidence so haunting is not just what it shows, but what it refuses to show. It suggests proximity. It suggests intent. It suggests someone was there, close enough to leave something behind, but never enough to identify. For investigators, these objects and recordings are not just pieces of a puzzle. They are memories. Many retired detectives have spoken about the cases that stayed with them, not because of media attention, not because of career impact, but because of one detail they couldn't explain. One piece of evidence that felt like it was almost speaking. Cold cases with haunting evidence carry a different kind of weight. They feel unfinished in a personal way. Investigators replay scenes in their minds. They revisit reports years later. They wonder what they missed. They question whether one small detail could have changed everything. Advancements in technology continue to reopen these cases. DNA is retested. Audio is enhanced. Photographs are digitally reconstructed. Sometimes the haunting evidence finally reveals its secret. And when it does, it often confirms what investigators felt all along, that the answer was always there, hidden inside that one detail. But many of these cases remain unsolved. The shoe in the back seat, the folded blanket, the breathing voicemail, the scratched-out face in a photograph, the unidentified fingerprint, the shadow in the footage. They remain preserved, cataloged, and stored carefully, waiting. Cold cases are not just unsolved crimes. They are unfinished conversations between the past and the present. And the evidence, silent, patient, unchanging, continues to haunt those who once tried to solve them. Because sometimes the most terrifying part of a cold case is not what we know. It's what the evidence refuses to tell us.